I was lying in that hospital bed, gripping the white sheets, as another contraction hit like a freight train. My husband David squeezed my hand, whispering, "Honey, we're almost there. Our little angel is coming." The delivery room felt warm and safe, filled with hope and anticipation. I thought about our nursery back home, painted soft yellow with tiny clouds on the ceiling. This was supposed to be the most beautiful day of our lives, but I had no idea that in just 20 minutes, my worst nightmare would walk through that door. And what happened next would change everything forever. Before I tell you what happened in that delivery room, I would love to know where you are watching from. Please hit that like button if you have ever felt like an outsider in your own family, and do not forget to subscribe, because this story has a twist that will leave you speechless. Trust me, you will want to hear how I fought back when it mattered most. Let me take you back to where this all began 3 years ago, when I married David Thompson. He was everything I had ever dreamed of in a husband. Sweet, gentle, with these incredible green eyes that sparkled when he laughed. David worked as a software engineer at a tech company downtown, and we met at a coffee shop near the university where I was finishing my nursing degree. Our love story felt like something out of a movie, except for one major problem: his father, Harold Thompson. Harold was a retired military man who had served 2 tours in Iraq. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with steel gray hair, always perfectly combed, and a permanent scowl etched into his weathered face. He lived with his wife Eleanor in the same house where David grew up, a modest 2-story colonial with an American flag flying proudly in the front yard. From the very first time David brought me home for dinner, I could feel Harold's disapproval radiating across that dining room table like heat from a furnace. You see, I come from a Mexican-American family. My parents, Maria and Carlos, immigrated to this country when I was just 2 years old. They worked multiple jobs to put me through school, and I was the first person in our family to graduate from college. I earned a full scholarship to nursing school through hard work and determination, not handouts. But none of that mattered to Harold. To him, I was not the kind of girl he had envisioned for his son. The first time he spoke to me directly, his words cut like broken glass. "You're not the kind of girl I wanted for my son," he said, his voice cold as winter morning air. "David deserves someone who understands our values, our way of life." I remember Eleanor quickly changing the subject, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment, but Harold's message was crystal clear. I was not welcome in his family. Over the next 2 years, every family gathering became a minefield. Harold would make comments about people like you when discussing immigration on the news. He would pointedly ignore me during conversations, speaking only to David, as if I was invisible. During our engagement party, he pulled David aside, and I overheard him saying, "Son, you sure you know what you're getting yourself into? These people have different priorities than us." David always defended me, bless his heart. He would get this tight expression around his eyes whenever his father started his nonsense. "Dad, Mia is going to be my wife. She's kind, intelligent, and I love her. That should be enough." But Harold never backed down, never apologized, never showed even a hint of acceptance. When I found out I was pregnant last spring, David was over the moon. We had been trying for 6 months, and that positive pregnancy test sent him running around our little apartment, whooping with joy. He immediately started making plans for converting the spare room into a nursery, talking about teaching our child to ride a bike and helping with homework. His excitement was infectious, and for a few blissful weeks, I forgot all about his father's hostility. But Harold's reaction to our pregnancy news was exactly what I had feared. When David called to share our joy, Harold's response was ice cold. "That baby better not take after her side," he said loud enough for me to hear through the phone. "I hope it looks like a Thompson." David's jaw tightened as he listened to his father's cruel words, and I watched my husband's happiness dim just a little. Eleanor tried to be supportive in her quiet way. She would call when Harold was not around, asking about my doctor appointments and offering to help with baby preparations. But she never stood up to her husband directly, never called him out for his behavior. I understood her position, but it still hurt to know that my mother-in-law was too afraid of her own husband to defend me openly. As my pregnancy progressed, Harold's hostility only grew worse. He refused to attend our baby shower, claiming he had better things to do than celebrate that situation. When we announced we were having a girl, he made disgusting comments about mixed kids and how confused our daughter would be about her identity. David finally exploded at him during a family barbecue, telling his father that if he could not respect his wife and unborn child, he was not welcome in our lives. But Harold was not the type of man to back down from a fight, especially one with his own son. The tension between them escalated throughout my third trimester. David would come home from visits with his parents, looking drained and frustrated. "I do not understand what happened to him," David would say, running his hands through his dark hair. "He used to be strict, but fair. Now, he is just mean." I made the decision to limit my exposure to Harold's toxicity. I stopped attending family dinners and gatherings where he would be present. David supported my choice, understanding that stress was not good for our baby. We focused on creating our own little family unit, surrounding ourselves with friends and my relatives, who celebrated our upcoming arrival with genuine joy and excitement. The night I went into labor, everything started perfectly. My water broke at 3 a.m, and David immediately went into protective husband mode. He had our hospital bag packed and ready by the front door for weeks, and he helped me into the car with such gentle care you would have thought I was made of spun glass. During the drive to St. Mary's Hospital, he kept one hand on the wheel and one hand holding mine, telling me how proud he was and how much he loved me. When we arrived at the hospital, the staff was wonderful. Our nurse, Sarah, was a motherly woman in her 50s who immediately put me at ease with her warm smile and calm competence. Dr. Williams, who had been monitoring my pregnancy for months, arrived shortly after we got settled into the delivery room. Everything felt safe and controlled, exactly how I had imagined this moment would be. David called his parents from the hospital to let them know labor had started. I could hear Harold's gruff voice through the phone saying, "We will be there when we feel like it." Not congratulations, not excitement about meeting his granddaughter, just that cold, dismissive response that had become his signature. I felt a knot of anxiety form in my stomach that had nothing to do with labor pains. The contractions had been steady for about 6 hours when I heard raised voices coming from the waiting area down the hall. Even through the closed door of our delivery room, I could recognize Harold's distinctive bark cutting through the usual hospital sounds. David's shoulders tensed immediately, and I saw him glance toward the door with worry written all over his face. "Honey, try to stay focused on breathing," David said, but I could tell he was distracted. The voices in the hallway were getting louder, and I caught fragments of Harold's angry words drifting toward our room. Something about rights and family and other things I could not quite make out over the sound of my own labored breathing. Sarah, our nurse, stepped out to check on the commotion and returned a few minutes later with a forced smile. "Everything is fine," she said, but her tone suggested otherwise. "Just some family members who are a bit anxious about the baby's arrival." David stood up and paced to the window, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. When Harold finally made his entrance into the waiting area, it was like a storm front moving through. Eleanor trailed behind him, her face flushed and apologetic as she tried to calm her husband down. "Harold, please, this is a hospital," she whispered urgently. "People are trying to rest and recover. You need to lower your voice. But Harold was not interested in being quiet or respectful. I could hear him complaining loudly to anyone who would listen about hospital policies and family rights. Why can't family be in there? He demanded of the nurses at the reception desk. I have a right to see my grandchild being born. This is discrimination, pure and simple. The poor staff tried to explain patient privacy and delivery room protocols, but Harold was having none of it. His military background had taught him to expect immediate compliance with his demands, and the hospital's gentle but firm boundaries only seemed to fuel his anger further. David finally left my side to go deal with his father directly. Through the partially open door, I could hear their heated conversation escalating in the hallway. "Dad, you need to calm down," David said, his voice strained with the effort of staying diplomatic. "Mia is in active labor. She needs peace and quiet right now, not chaos and drama." Harold's response made my blood run cold. "You're letting her call the shots. Man up, son. You're acting like a whipped dog instead of the head of your own household." The contempt in his voice was unmistakable, and I felt tears of frustration and hurt well up in my eyes. About an hour later, Dr. Williams came in for a routine check, and his expression grew serious as he monitored our baby's heart rate. The numbers on the screen were lower than they had been, and I could see concern flickering across his professional features. "The baby's heart rate has dropped a bit," he explained calmly. "It's not uncommon, but we need to monitor things more closely for the next little while." David immediately returned to my bedside, his face pale with worry. "Is she going to be okay? Is there anything we need to do?" His voice was tight, with barely controlled panic, and I reached out to squeeze his hand, even though I was feeling scared myself. "Our baby is going to be fine," I told him firmly, trying to project confidence I did not entirely feel. "Women have been doing this for thousands of years. We are stronger than we know." But inside, I was praying desperately that everything would work out the way we had planned. That was when Harold decided he had waited long enough. I heard his heavy footsteps approaching our door, followed by his voice demanding entry. "I have a right to see my grandchild being born," he bellowed. "This is my son's baby, which makes it my family too." The nurses stationed outside our room politely, but firmly refused his request. "Sir, only the people on the approved list can enter the delivery room," one of them explained. "Patient privacy and safety are our top priorities here at St. Mary's." Harold's reaction was explosive. "This is discrimination," he roared. "You people always stick together. Do not you? Protecting her against real family." The racist undertone in his words was impossible to miss, and I felt my stress levels spike dangerously high. David stormed out of our room, his patience finally reaching its breaking point. "Dad, what the hell is wrong with you?" he snapped. "This is not about you. This is about my wife, safely delivering our child. Your behavior is completely out of line. Do not you dare take her side over your own father." Harold shot back. "She has poisoned you against your own blood family. Before her, you respected me and listened to my advice. Now, you act like I am some kind of enemy." The argument continued to escalate, with both men's voices rising to levels that could probably be heard throughout the entire maternity ward. Other families in the waiting area were staring, and I could see Eleanor wringing her hands helplessly as she watched her husband and son tear into each other with increasing viciousness. Harold began throwing around accusations that cut straight to my heart. He claimed I had deliberately trapped David with this pregnancy, that I was manipulating him to cut ties with his birth family. "She is changing you, son," he declared. "You used to have backbone, used to understand loyalty and family honor. Now you are dancing to her tune like a trained monkey." From my hospital bed, Listening to these horrible words while experiencing the most intense physical experience of my life, I felt something inside me begin to crack. The stress was making my contractions more painful, and the baby's heart rate continued to fluctuate on the monitors in concerning ways. Eleanor finally tried to intervene more forcefully. "Harold, that is enough," she said, her voice shaking with uncharacteristic boldness. "Think about your grandchild. This stress is not good for the baby or for Mia. Please just step back and let them have this moment." But Harold was too far gone in his rage to listen to reason, even from his wife of 35 years. Hospital security was called when he refused to leave the waiting area, but he managed to convince them that he was just a concerned grandfather who was worried about his family. They allowed him to stay, which turned out to be a terrible mistake. I was deep into the pushing stage when everything went to hell. Dr. Williams was coaching me through each contraction, and David was right there beside me, whispering encouragement and wiping sweat from my forehead. The moment felt sacred and intense, like we were standing on the threshold of a miracle. Our daughter was almost here, and despite all the drama in the hallway, I was managing to focus on bringing her safely into the world. That was when the delivery room door burst open with a bang that made everyone in the room jump. Harold Thompson stood in the doorway like an avenging angel, his face red with fury, and his eyes wild with an emotion I could not quite identify. "This is my grandchild," he roared. "I will not let her ruin my family anymore." The medical team immediately went into crisis mode. "Sir, you cannot be in here," Dr. Williams commanded, his professional composure cracking for the first time since I had known him. "This is a sterile environment. You need to leave immediately." But Harold was beyond listening to anyone at that point. He had somehow slipped past the nurse's station, and the security guards, driven by a rage that seemed to have consumed all his rational thinking. His presence in that delivery room felt like a violation of the most intimate kind, turning what should have been a beautiful moment into something terrifying and traumatic. "Dad, get out now!" David shouted immediately, standing up from his position beside my bed. His voice carried a tone I had never heard from him before, something primal and protective that came from deep in his chest. I was caught between a contraction and absolute terror, unable to fully process what was happening. The monitors around my bed started beeping frantically as my stress response sent my vital signs skyrocketing. Our baby's heart rate plummeted on the screen, and I could see genuine alarm flash across Dr. Williams' face. Harold moved toward my bed with what looked like violent intent, his hands clenched into fists and his face twisted with hatred. "You manipulative little," he started to say, but David threw himself between his father and me before Harold could finish that sentence. "Do not you dare touch my wife," David yelled, grabbing his father's shoulders and physically restraining him. The two men began wrestling right there in the delivery room, crashing into medical equipment and sending instruments clattering to the floor. I was screaming, though, whether from pain, fear, or rage, I could not tell. Everything was happening so fast that my mind could barely keep up. The sound of the heart monitor was getting more alarming by the second, and I could hear Dr. Williams shouting orders to the nursing staff about emergency procedures. "We need this room cleared immediately," he commanded. "If this continues, we might need an emergency cesarean section." The words sent ice through my veins because I knew that meant our baby was in serious distress. David was younger and stronger than his father, but Harold fought with the desperation of a man who felt like his entire world was crumbling around him. They knocked over a tray of medical supplies, and I watched in horror as they stumbled dangerously close to the bed where I was laboring. The nursing staff was trying to maintain some semblance of order while preparing for the possibility that they might need to perform emergency surgery to save our baby's life. Sarah was at my head trying to keep me calm and focused while the chaos erupted around us. "Mia, honey, you need to breathe," she said urgently. "Focus on my voice and just breathe." But breathing felt impossible when my husband and father-in-law were engaged in physical combat just feet away from where I was trying to bring their grandchild and daughter into the world. The whole situation felt surreal, like something out of a nightmare, rather than what was supposed to be the most beautiful day of our lives. That was when something inside me snapped. In the middle of all that chaos and violence, with my baby's life potentially hanging in the balance, I found a strength I did not know I possessed. It came from somewhere deep and primal, the same place that had driven mothers throughout history to protect their children against any threat. "Get him out of here now!" I screamed at the top of my lungs, my voice cutting through all the other noise in that room like a knife through butter. Every single person stopped what they were doing and turned to look at me. Even Harold paused in his struggle with David. I locked eyes with my father-in-law and spoke with a clarity and power that surprised even me. "You will not hurt my child's security." My voice carried across that delivery room like a battle cry, and I saw something shift in Harold's expression. For just a moment, he seemed to realize exactly what he had done. Then I turned to my husband, who was still holding his father's arms. "Choose David, right now, your father or your family." The words hung in the air between us, heavy, with the weight of everything that had led to this moment. David did not hesitate for even a second. "Security," he called out, echoing my demand. "Get my father out of this room before he kills my wife and child." Harold's face went through a series of emotions: rage, disbelief, and finally something that might have been shame. But as hospital security finally arrived to escort him out, he could not resist one final, cruel, parting shot. "You will regret this, girl," he spat in my direction. "Mark my words, this is not over." As they dragged him from the delivery room, still ranting about his rights and his family, I felt something settle in my chest. The immediate crisis was over, but I knew that our lives had just changed forever. David came back to my side, his face pale and his hands shaking, but his eyes were clear with purpose and determination. Once Harold was finally removed from the delivery room, something almost magical happened. The chaos settled. The monitors stopped their frantic beeping, and I felt my body begin to relax for the first time in what felt like hours. Our baby's heart rate stabilized on the screen, and Dr. Williams nodded with visible relief as he watched the numbers return to normal ranges. "Okay, Mia, let's bring your daughter into the world," he said with renewed confidence. "Everything is looking good now. I think she was just as stressed by that situation as you were." 45 minutes later, Isabella Maria Thompson entered the world with a healthy cry that was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. 7 pounds, 3 ounces of perfect baby girl with David's green eyes and a head full of dark hair that reminded me of my own mother. David was crying as Dr. Williams placed her on my chest, and I felt overwhelmed by a love so intense it took my breath away. "She's perfect, Mia," David whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You are amazing. I am so proud of you." He kissed my forehead gently, and I could see in his eyes that everything we had just been through had only made his commitment to our little family stronger. About an hour after Isabella was born, Eleanor appeared at our door with tears streaming down her face. David hesitated before letting her in, but I nodded my permission. She approached our bed slowly, like she was afraid we might send her away. And when she saw her granddaughter for the first time, She broke down completely. "I am so sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "What Harold did was unforgivable. I have been trying to make excuses for his behavior for years, but today he crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed." She looked at me directly, her eyes red with tears. "Mia, you are a wonderful mother already. Isabella is lucky to have you." David made it crystal clear that his father would not be welcome at the hospital or in our home until he offered a sincere apology and demonstrated real change in his attitude. "He is not welcome around my wife and daughter until he can treat them with basic human respect," David told his mother firmly. "I mean it, Mom. Those days are over." The hospital incident had consequences beyond just our family drama. Harold's disruption of a medical procedure was reported to the authorities, and he faced potential legal charges for endangering a patient and her unborn child. The hospital security footage clearly showed him forcing his way into a restricted area and creating a dangerous situation during a medical emergency. 3 days later, when we brought Isabella home, David had a serious conversation with his father over the phone. I could only hear David's side of the conversation, but his voice was calm and resolute in a way that made me proud of the man I had married. "Dad, you crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed," David said into the phone. "You put my wife and daughter's lives in danger because of your prejudice and your pride. My wife and daughter come first now. They will always come first." There was a long pause as Harold spoke, and then David continued. "When you are ready to respect my family, all of my family, then we can talk. Until then, do not contact us." Harold's response was exactly what we expected. He refused to apologize or acknowledge any wrongdoing. Instead, he doubled down on his position, claiming that he had been defending his family's honor and that David was being manipulated by me. His stubbornness cost him more than just his relationship with his son. Eleanor finally found the courage that had been hiding inside her for 35 years of marriage. 2 weeks after Isabella was born, she filed for divorce, stating that she could no longer enable her husband's hatred and bigotry. "I will not let his poison infect my relationship with my granddaughter," she told us during one of her visits. "Some things are more important than keeping the peace." The rest of David's extended family gradually took sides, and most of them chose to support our little family over Harold's destructive behavior. David's sister flew in from California to meet Isabella, and she made it clear that she thought her father had completely lost his mind. "You would think he would want to be part of his granddaughter's life," she said, shaking her head in disbelief. Harold found himself increasingly isolated as the consequences of his actions became clear. His own brother stopped speaking to him after hearing about the hospital incident. Several of his old military buddies distanced themselves when they learned how he had endangered a laboring mother and her baby. The man who had always prided himself on his honor and integrity discovered that his prejudice had cost him almost everything that really mattered. I would be lying if I said the trauma of that delivery room experience did not affect me. For weeks afterward, I had nightmares about Harold bursting through doors and trying to hurt Isabella. The sound of raised male voices would make me jump and clutch my baby closer to my chest. David noticed my reactions and suggested we try counseling to help me process what had happened. "You showed incredible strength in that delivery room," my therapist told me during one of our sessions. "You protected your child in the most difficult circumstances imaginable. That takes a kind of courage that many people never have to find." Her words helped me begin to see that day, not just as a trauma, but as a moment when I discovered just how fierce and powerful maternal love could make me. Building healthy boundaries became essential for our healing process. We had to learn how to protect our little family from toxic influences while still remaining open to the people who genuinely cared about us. Eleanor earned her place in Isabella's life by consistently showing respect and love for all of us, proving that change was possible even after decades of enabling bad behavior. David demonstrated his loyalty to our family every single day through his actions and choices. When Harold made one final attempt to reconcile without apologizing, demanding to see his granddaughter on her first birthday, David stood firm. "I will always choose Mia and Isabella," he told his father, every single time. That is what being a husband and father means. As Isabella grew from a newborn into a happy, curious baby, I found a peace that I had not expected to feel so soon after such a traumatic experience. Watching my daughter smile and laugh, seeing the pure joy she brought to everyone who loved her properly, reminded me that love always wins in the end. The people who cannot celebrate that kind of innocent beauty reveal their own limitations, not ours. I learned that becoming a mother means becoming a fierce protector, someone willing to face down any threat to keep your child safe. I learned that some people will never accept you, no matter how kind or accomplished you are, and that their rejection is their loss, not yours. I learned that true family consists of the people who stand beside you in your darkest moments, not just the people who share your DNA. Most importantly, I learned that you have the right to cut toxic people out of your life, even when they are family members. Your children's safety and well-being come before anyone's feelings or expectations. Love does not require you to tolerate abuse, manipulation, or hatred dressed up as tradition or family loyalty. Isabella is 2 years old now, and she has never met her paternal grandfather. She does not ask about him because her world is filled with people who love and celebrate her exactly as she is. Eleanor is a devoted grandmother who reads her stories and teaches her to bake cookies. My parents spoil her with affection and pride. David's sister calls every week to hear about Isabella's latest adventures. Sometimes I wonder if Harold ever thinks about what he gave up, what his prejudice and pride cost him. But mostly, I focus on the beautiful life we have built without his toxic influence. Our home is filled with laughter, acceptance, and the kind of love that makes people stronger rather than tearing them down. That delivery room taught me that when push comes to shove, you find out who people really are. And more importantly, you find out who you really are. I am a mother who will fight anyone who tries to hurt my child. I am a woman who will not accept mistreatment in the name of keeping peace. I am strong enough to cut ties with people who bring darkness into our light. What would you have done if you were in my position that day? Have you ever had to choose between keeping peace and protecting someone you love? Please share your thoughts in the comments below, and do not forget to like this video if my story resonated with you. Subscribe for more real stories about finding strength in difficult family situations, and share this video with anyone who might need to hear that they have the power to protect their own happiness. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you all the courage to choose love over fear always.